All right, you're welcome back, and you're still watching us on Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. A fortnight ago, President Muhammadu Buhari inaugurated his new cabinet, and what emerged from the inauguration ceremony was also the creation of several new entities, particularly ministries. One in particular is that of the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. There was also the merger, of course, of the Ministries of Finance and Budget and National Planning. This morning, we are taking a look at the task ahead of the new ministry in charge of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development. With us in the studios to discuss this, let's welcome Chuks Akamado, of the Alliance Against Drug Abuse. Chuks Akamado, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. So also here with us in the studios, would like to welcome Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obiezu, is a migration governance expert as well as coordinator of the Augustine Center for Peace, Advocacy and Peace Justice. Once again, I take that once again. Reverend Father Emeka Obiezu is a migration governance expert and coordinator of the Augustine Center for Peace, Advocacy and Justice. Reverend Father Emeka, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
My pleasure, thank you.
Clem Oluwole is managing editor and columnist with Blueprint newspapers based here in Abuja. Clem, pleasure to have you with us on the program. And last but not the least, regular face on Good Morning Nigeria, Dr. Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, a researcher and public affairs analyst. Hamisu, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning, NPS.
Okay, well, let's begin the conversation this way. I mean, we started off when we had the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. We asked what the rationalization was, in our opinion, for the merger of finance and budget and national planning, considering that only the first term of the president, the two were separated. Well, here we have a ministry of, federal ministry, by the way, of humanitarian affairs, disaster management, and social development. Is there any congruence involving these three heads, or we have a new super ministry? Dr. Hamisu first.
Okay, for those that are familiar with the humanitarian world, you come to agree with the fact that though the ministry may look very big, but the work that needs to be done are interrelated. Though I have the opportunity to work in that very particular corridor, and you cannot separate issues around humanitarian intervention from disaster management as well as social development. But sometimes it equally involves children that needed to grow in a certain environment and then reintegrating those people back into the society. So even from the Nigerian national security strategy, issues around threats arising from the environment, man-made disasters and stuff like that has to do with humanitarian intervention. And with what is happening in Nigeria, for instance, you have humanitarian issues going on in the Northeast, which is the largest in the East of Africa. Then you talk about the refugees from Cameroon that are in Cross River. Then you come back to North Central Nigeria, where you have a lot of issues around farmers, herders, and clashes that has resulted into displacement of persons that are living in camps. So all of this call for a strategic framework that's supposed to focus on these issues and give them the needed context within which they can be resolved properly for effective functioning of those displaced persons back in the society again. And lastly, there is something that is going on in the state, and even the papers reported one of it, which is flooding. Year in, year out, the federal government is saddled with the responsibility of having to assist victims of flood, where you have state emergency management agencies that have really not done anything in terms of effective framework to manage such situations so that reoccurrence is prevented. So what has been happening is people are displaced, federal government give them support, they go back to the same area that they were displaced last year, and then before you know, the next issue will be they are not properly sensitized and stuff like that. So if you have a ministry that is charged with a problem-solving approach. I'm using this word because I know the implication. Problem-solving approach. For instance, if this ministry is charged with problem-solving capacity, to the extent that our crises are managed in such a way that reoccurrence is managed and will not have recurrence, I think that is the right word, will not have a recurrence of it, is going to save Nigeria a lot of money than this ad hoc arrangement. This state is doing something different, the other state is doing something different within the same. So I think this very particular ministry is the right framework that we needed if the right structures are put in place, right attitude, right manpower. I'm using the word right because I know that some of these things could be established, but getting them to function properly to achieve the mandate for which it was established becomes a problem. So for me, it is a right framework that we're supposed to use to solve these problems of humanitarian crisis that we are witnessing, disaster management. Disaster management is very poor. That is just the truth of the matter. And then social development. Social development is the development of social and emotional skills for either kids or any other person to assist them to function properly. So for me, it's the right thing to do, and it's very strategic.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Abdulrahman Hamisu. Let's bring in Reverend Father Chris Obiezo. It's still on seeking to understand, the creation of this new ministry, at least from the perspective of outsiders. Would it be, in a sense, a surplusage to have added social development when disaster management and humanitarian issues are plenty in the country?
Thank you once again. Just like Doctor said, those three areas are interrelated and cannot be separated in terms of responses to the issues they raise. And creating it actually responds to the reality of what happens in the humanitarian landscape today, globally, if we have to situate it where it belongs. What we are experiencing in the humanitarian action is a systemic issue of expansion in terms of humanitarian needs as well as in terms of responses. We are beginning to see multiplicity as well as complexity of humanitarian needs. And we're beginning to see also the rising of new and different actors as well as the emergence of new forms and the modalities of assistance. So when all these things are in play, whether they are being recognized as a threat or as a welcome event, they suggest that the traditional understanding of humanitarian action or humanitarian aid has expanded beyond those dominant understanding that there is a particular institution that handles it. For instance, even in the global world, it is now established or known that the traditional institutions, whether they are state or non-state actors, such as the UN itself, can no longer have or do no longer have a monopoly of delivering service, either to alleviate poverty or to solve, assist in terms of conflict. So this actually, I think what Nigeria is doing is keen into what is already existing. As far back as in 1987, the World International Body created the World Humanitarian Commission just to do this, and that was followed up in the 1991 creation of the UN Office for the Coordinating of Humanitarian Affairs. That steps down even to the African Union having it. Just in 2016 here, the different humanitarian actors in the country have come together to form what we call the humanitarian country team, with operational guides on how to do it. So, like when we look at the landscape, there is interconnectedness of issues. Humanitarian emergency is anything at all that threatens the well-being of the individual. And humanitarianism itself is this belief in the human person. So, it could be social issues, could be disaster. And looking at Nigerian terrain, we see the diversity playing out, the multiplicity playing out, both in the needs and in the actors as well. So creating an office like this is, I think it should be charged with a clear purpose, and that will be purpose of coordinating. It is not going to usurp the power of other ones or kill the other ones, because there needs to have all these actors play. But when they are not coordinated, what we see is either duplication of activities or even loss of efficiency in response. And those who will bear the brunt of these inconsistencies and inefficiencies will be the beneficiaries themselves. And this is why in situations where we need what we call durable solutions, take for instance the IDP he mentioned. The IDP rises from the state of emergency to the state of durable solution. Emergency, you respond to the need. But what happens? He said, you rush with humanitarian aids, relief of all kinds. But when that ends, what happens to the IDPs? They naturally want to return back to their original place or want to resettle somewhere where they will have their life. But when you don't have a coordination in that way, then we don't have it happen. So I think one of the key things this ministry is going to do is to provide that space of coordination that will enhance collaboration of actors. Know you that there are special agencies in the country that are facing or responding to issues of humanitarian and social issues. But there are also the crisscrossing of all ministries, departments and agencies. For instance, it could happen from health, security, and other things. But all these ministries have to do something. But when everybody is in the field and everybody is doing something, targeting one goal or one person, one constituency, when they are not coordinated, we can see the fallout from there. And this is what is happening, like he said, with our disaster management is poor because of lack of coordination. We have a national policy on IDP that is still waiting for how long to be adopted because we are still not sure where it situates. So a commission a ministry like this should be able to enhance, speed up the adoption of that policy, domicile it in the place where it's supposed to be for effective operational usage of such policy. So I would think, just as he said, social dimension of it is a key ingredient to what it means to respond to social issues, especially when we are concerned with tackling the root causes. Because sometimes we stay on the periphery, and so we always attack symptoms, and then the issues remain. So at the basis of most of these things are social cohesion, like in terms of crisis between communities. So a commission like this should provide strategic framework that will enable people to foresee beforehand in a kind of proactional dimensions. See these things beforehand, propose strategies of cutting it down, or in certain situations as well, provide a mechanism that ensures that there is, again, a durable solution to this issue that they may not be returning again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You've raised a lot of issues. I'm coming now to Mr. Chuks Akamadu, Alliance Against Drug Abuse.
Yes, ma'am.
It's one of the disasters eating deep into the fabric of our nation. Yeah, a lot of kids, women, and children have been lost along that line. It has generated a lot of discourse. Let's look at the synergy between the ministry and the state governments, SEMA, NEMA, and the new ministry now. So how should they synergize between themselves to ensure that, social development responsibilities should not go beyond what we know in this country now? How do we assess, aid? How do we assess all these things? And how does the ministry synergize with the state government to ensure that it's kickstarts its work very, very fast?
Thank you very much. Foremost, I would like to commend Mr. President for showing this humane part of him. With the creation of this Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Nigerians can now clearly say that Mr. President feels the pains of the average Nigerian. We never knew that he had been having sleepless nights over disasters, over rising humanitarian issues, and of course, the social development deficit that Nigeria has recorded over time. Having said that, I would also want to thank him for deeming it fit to appoint a woman as the pioneer minister of that ministry, because a woman, of course, would always be best suited to champion such causes. And thankfully, he did his homework very well by picking Hajia Sadia Omar Farouk. With her background in the Refugee Commission, just background, of course, sterling accomplishments, we couldn't have had a better deal. That's it. The issue of drug abuse is actually a worsening emergency on our hands. And it is refreshing to know that we now have a ministry that will be in a position to stimulate the requisite interest across board. When I say across board, of course, I mean across state actors and non-state actors. You were talking about how the federal government can begin to engage state governments to tackle the menace of drug abuse. It doesn't stop there. I think we now have a ministry that should look at it holistically and begin to think of a lasting solution. We now have a ministry that should properly contextualize this scourge of drug abuse to enable Nigerians to realize that we've all actually become critical stakeholders, because the menace of drug abuse is such that it has overwhelmed the state institutions that are statutorily charged to deal with it. NDLEA can no longer do it alone. The Nigerian police cannot do it alone. What do you call it? NAFDA cannot do it alone. But with the coming of this ministry, my expectation is that the ministry will begin to look at how it can involve the three tiers of government and the three arms of government, really. When the ministry interfaces with the three tiers of government and three arms of government, that way the private sector can also be reached out to, because the corporate social responsibility of multinationals and other blue chip companies also will have to come in here to complement the commendable effort of the government. And again, I would want to talk about the social development dimension of this ministry. I consider it as the most heartwarming thing that would happen to us in recent times. Why? Because before now, the social development department had always been with the sports youth. But now it's been brought home to this ministry. Home in the sense that if you look at humanitarian affairs, it's curative. It's some kind of intervention that you're doing. If you look at disaster management, it's intervention again. But the social development dimension is very good because it seeks to tackle the issues at the very root. It's preventive. Because the social development, when you look at social development, the entire gamut of the social development dimension of this ministry requires us to begin to look at even our family unit. How do we raise our children? How do we get to a situation where secondary school students now go for drugs as though their lives depend on it? Of course, this explains that, come on, somehow our values have collapsed over time. And of course, we must all find the courage to admit that indeed our institutions have failed. Secondary school, our teachers, our schools, our mosques, our churches, name it. So that's why we expect that in the days ahead, this ministry would begin to engage these diverse stakeholder groups and ensure that a harmonious action plan is conceived, and everybody must take a part in it, so that at the end of the day, we can retrieve our youth from the claws of drug abuse. Otherwise, we are really in danger. A station whereby as far back as 2017, the Kaduna Neuropsychiatric Hospital released figures, and the figures indicated that in the Northwest alone, 600 million bottles of codeine expectorant are sold on a daily basis. What a massive economy. We can't continue like this. Something just has to be done. And then, interestingly, we have the Presidential Advisory Committee on Elimination of Drug Abuse, headed by Brigadier General Buba Marwa, retired, and all of that. So things actually are looking up for us if the right things are done by this new ministry.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Kamadu, for your point. We're able to get into the nitty-gritty of the conversation that's already touched on by the other guests. But Claire Moluwole, we would like to have your views on this. I mean, some persons have said, some commentators have observed that humanitarian affairs and disaster management on their own are big challenges in our current state of things, and that to add social development to it would appear to be excessive. I mean, if we're talking about floods a while ago, Hamisu was drawing our attention to the fact that you need to coordinate, you need to be effective. If you have 36 SEMAs and you have the FCT, that's 37, and then you have the NEMA itself, and then you have insurgency, you have farmers' herders clashes, you have communal clashes, and you have all kinds of displacement. And we don't appear to be up to scratch with regard to our response to humanitarian crisis. So if crisis is what humanitarian affairs and disaster management will be, social development would be generally, under situations that are not of a crisis nature, why lump all of them together?
Well, I think first and foremost, like the barrister said, Mr. President, in his wisdom, thought it wise to create this new ministry. Why not reading the minds of the Mr. President before taking that decision? I think about 2 years or so ago, the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs classified Nigeria, Somalia, Yemen, and South Sudan as 4 countries with the highest numbers of displaced persons on earth. And that's the statistics are quite frightening. They said about 20 million Africans are internally displaced. Of this figure, the Northeast and Lake Chad region are home to 8.5 million out of the 20 million that are entirely displaced on the continent. And of this 8.5 million, the 3 states of Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe, which are the hotbeds of this Boko Haram insurgency, also account for about 1.8 million of internally displaced people. The United Nations also, in its wisdom, set up August 19 every year as World Humanitarian Day. That shows that humanitarian crisis is a global phenomenon which nobody can wish away. Until the Boko Haram insurgency came up, we never had any such crisis of this magnitude, apart from the Niger Delta militancy that displaced, and those were very isolated. When compared to what has been going on in the Northeast, which snowballed to other states like North Central, Northwest, and such places across the country, we discovered that the establishment of this new ministry is not only timely, but long overdue. Okay? And also coupled with the flood disasters that we are witnessing all over the country now. I think the first major one was recorded in 2012. And the federal government at that time set up a committee, I think headed by Aliko Dangote, to manage the crisis. Funds were raised across the states. But over time, it built up to what we are witnessing since the onset of flooding. I think it was mentioned by one of the discussants that in August alone, it rained all through the month of August. Places that were not known for flooding began to experience massive flooding. Houses destroyed, businesses destroyed, lives lost, and so on and so forth. So when you aggregate all this together, you discover that the time is ripe to have a ministry that will take full responsibility for all this crisis. We have SEMA, we have NEMA. All these agencies should be subsumed under the new ministry and be given a direction. This new ministry can only function properly if the required leadership is provided, if the support is given, if it is well funded, okay? And in funding, we expect that the ministry will seek synergy with the National Assembly. Because this ministry is coming up in the middle of the, well, towards the end of the year. There's no budget in place, I believe. But you cannot, as he said, you cannot shape somebody behind him or plant somebody, say, behind her. So with the ministry in place now, it will provide policy framework. It will also put in place the right mechanism that will drive the ministry to achieve the desired goal. As for the margin of social development to the ministry, I wouldn't see it as surplus to requirement, because instead of, you know, your attention being distracted here and there, you now have all these very important aspects under one roof to be coordinated by a ministry. And like the barrister said, it is the new minister appointed for that ministry is caught out for the responsibility because of pedigree in the Refugees, National Refugees Commission. So I believe that she will not hit the ground running. She's already running. Okay? She's already running because of the background, because of her background, where she was coming from. So the attachment or the inclusion of the social development is very key, in the sense that all these humanitarian crises, all these disaster crises, they have far-reaching implications on the socio-economic lives of the victims. So with that social development attached to that ministry, the minister, or the minister rather, will be able to harness all resources, logistic resources, and other needs to be able to move, to find solution, lasting solution to the problems that I think are fallout of humanitarian crisis and disaster crisis. Okay? The social development primarily remains a victim, as it were, of all these disasters, all these humanitarian crises. So it's very good and appropriate that this social development ministry, development is attached to this ministry. So it should not be seen as doing surplus to requirement. And then besides, I also want to talk about a very important aspect, you know, the absence of which, or the mismanagement of which, has led to this humanitarian crisis that has engulfed this nation. Forget about disaster management, because disasters could be man-made and often natural, okay? So it is very, very necessary to also tackle what the causative factors of this humanitarian crisis, which is insecurity, okay? I'm very personally happy that the Ministry of, in spite of the brouhaha over the increase in the size of the cabinet of President Muhammad Buhari. I'm personally happy that Police Affairs Ministry is back. It was created during Obasanjo, and it was taken out at a point, but I'm personally happy that it's because I have been passionate about the police, the way police are treated in the security setup in the country. Presently, we have less than 400,000 police.
You know what, Mr. Clem,
okay.
yeah, we'll return to that when we have enough time in the course of this conversation. Okay. Our chief focus this morning has to do with the humanitarian affairs, disaster management, and social development. Now, in terms of agenda setting for the new ministry, which is an amalgam of a number of agencies that previously undertook these responsibilities, let's return again to our evaluation of what the state is of our response to disasters, whether at the national or subnational levels, and then to the humanitarian crisis that erupt in different parts of the country. First, Reverend Father Obiezu, and then Dr. Hamisu.
Yeah. Again, when we go back to our disaster management in terms of what we do, I again bring the merging together of the needs and the response. And it has come up from our conversation here that, especially bringing in the social dimension of it, that when we separate social development, when we separate, we're actually cutting off the root causes of most of these things. He put aside disaster as something that could come prepared or unprepared. But the reoccurrence of certain humanitarian issues, emergencies, are rooted in absence or unwell-managed social issues. So, and that plays out in how we respond when we have a humanitarian issue. What do we have? We have a multiplication of actors. People tell you this is what they do better, and they jump into it. And at the end, everybody is responding to that, which is the tip of the iceberg. And when we do that, we find out that just sometimes we might be lucky to have a 1 year to come before they come up again. But sometimes as you are getting out of the scene, you are seeing the same thing again. So it calls back to the issue of doing a very strategic work of planning. A planning that is holistic, a planning that is inclusive. This is where I return back to the point I made, that the creation of this ministry should not by any attempt, and I know the minister, being who she is, having worked in an office that coordinated different arms of mobility, she is able to know that the best way to get a result is to provide a platform of collaboration, of inclusive participation of all actors. So, to set the ball rolling for a good success should be this ministry, first and foremost, mapping out which areas fall under it. Who are the actors in this field? Without any bias, without any preconception of anything, invite everybody to a conversation that we first define and understand what is the distinctive purpose of each of these ministries or agencies or whatever they are. What are your mandates? What are you able to do? Then assess their operation already. What have you been able to do executing your own mandates? Then what are your challenges? Then the question is, what can we achieve better doing it together? This is where the coordination is very important. And as I said, Nigeria is not doing something new by creating this. In short, somebody said it's long overdue. We are simply coming into play of what should be the coordination of humanitarian affairs by bringing in all these actors together. And that would, I foresee it, going to help our management of humanitarian issues step years ahead. If this ministry starts off well with what I've suggested, make that great effort in doing the homework of getting who are the actors, what are the areas needed, and then what strategic plans that will come in. I often, as a policy analyst, we usually think, or we usually say, which happens in most cases, that when there is an issue and the government doesn't want to solve it, they will create one policy, or create one ministry, or create one division. But looking at this, I said, okay, this is the time we have done something right. Because I don't see that doing something different apart from this core coordination. As everybody have said here, there is a ministry, there is an agency, there is a group somewhere. And then let us not forget non-state actors. It is not just about the institutional state actors. There are 1,000 of non-state actors. We hear cases of international and local actors, non-governmental actors working in the Northeast. Some of them have gotten into unhealthy competition, and then we see some duplication of activities, and at the end, Northeast has been there for how long? And it's still there. And the attention is not just Northeast. Nigeria all over is boiling. And so if we do not do this mathematics very well at this particular time, and everybody has said it, looking at the pedigree of this minister, we are assured that she will gather the right people and be able to put the things right.
Dr. Hamisu.
Yeah, you know, sometimes there are responsibilities that can be overwhelming. But if you have your priorities mapped out, it is easier for you to achieve whatever you want to achieve. I know what is required for the ministry to really make impact are just three. One is the right leadership. The second thing, again, is the policy trust that the ministry wants to run with. Then the last one is funding. I had the opportunity to work with the minister on the tripartite commission for the repatriation of Nigerian refugees in Cameroon. So she chairs the technical working group that has been working in the last 2 years to ensure that these refugees are returned safely and in dignity. And to the best of my knowledge and what I know, in terms of coordination, you will not find out one thing. The only problem we're going to have, which is a normal problem in Nigeria, is tough war. As it is now, some ministries have started taking inventories, some agencies have started taking inventories. Okay, they've taken part of our power and given to the new ministry. They've taken some of our power and given. So the desire to collaborate is often dealt a fatal blow by tough war. Everybody wants to hold on to what they feel is their own mandate. But if the attitude that most of the MDs displayed on this very particular technical working group assignment is anything to go by, then I think she already have a model she can run with. She doesn't impose her will. We sit around the table and she asks of people's opinion based on the mandate of the organization. And everybody does, everybody says what the organization is doing, and you represent your organization. So the template is already there in terms of coordination that you'll be hammering. So as somebody rightly pointed out, she's already running. So she have that. Secondly, she was at the forefront of the humanitarian response, humanitarian dialogue for the Lake Chad region. That is the second version of it that I held in Transcorp. I think I chaired one of the sessions, and she was visible. So, in terms of humanitarian crisis in Lake Chad region, which is the biggest, as you rightly mentioned, there is a framework on the ground already. The next steps are there. She's conversant with it. She participated. She represented Nigeria all through the program. So she already knows what the issues are around Lake Chad, especially these four countries, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and then Nigeria. Yeah. Four. And then they were in Transcorp, and the framework is there. Everything is there. Now, in terms of our refugees, the refugees from Cameroon that are in Cross River, she has been doing a lot, and she has mapped out most of the conflict areas where we have this humanitarian crisis. So what she needed in terms of that is there already. Now, the next problem will be, is the ministry coming to employ people to pay salary, or it is coming to function and work? We have to define that properly. That is why I said the policy direction of the ministry is very key. Some of the ministries in this country have refused to do their work. They've turned themselves into two outlets. One for employing people and paying salary. The other one is giving out contract that will not even impact the lives of the people. So does this ministry want to go that direction? That is the question for the minister to answer. But if I were to, if I'm to advise her, I would turn that ministry into problem-solving ministry. By problem-solving ministry, we are going to have a policy direction that mandates state to take certain actions and responsibilities that prevent crisis, either from escalating or from equally preventing them from erupting, or that if they erupt, they're properly managed to the extent that the other end that you say is not excessive, use the word for it, that is the social development.
Yes.
Not surplus requirements.
Not surplus. Because at the end of it all, he mentioned it, but that is the terms that is used for such thing in the developing world, which is durable solution. At the end of every disaster management, you are going to reintegrate people back into their communities. Orphans will be reintegrated back into their communities. Widows will be reintegrated back into their communities. So the end product of humanitarian responses, disaster management, is the social development. Because most of these people that are displaced must have lost a lot, and they needed to bounce back. So the social development angle of it is to give life back to these persons, from being supported in the camps to becoming useful for yourself and the society, which means you need durable solution. This durable solution could be skills. It could be farm input. It could be herbicide. It could be fertilizer. It could be nursery school. For instance, in the Northeast, particularly in Borno State, we have over 50,000 orphans.
More than.
Yeah, that's why I said over.
More than 100.
Yeah. So over 50, conservatively, that is the figure that we are using for now. Yeah. You have up to say, you have over 50,000. And these orphans needed somebody that will cater for them so that they will become useful to the society, so that they don't bear grudges against the society, so that they don't see the society as the cause of their problem. So social development angle of that very particular ministry is very, very vital. So for me, the policy direction should be problem solving. What I mean by problem solving is the one that ensure that, one, those that are preventable are prevented. You don't allow them to erupt. Those that we cannot prevent, we manage them in such a way that they don't escalate, they don't inflict misery. For instance, when you keep people in the camp, if there are no proper hygiene practices, relationships, the first thing you will get is escalation of health crisis. Yes. For instance, HIV/AIDS. For instance, tuberculosis. For instance, the issue of drugs that we are talking about. These are other additional costs that, if you don't manage crisis properly, is going to add burdens to the government by imposing additional costs in terms of disease. Then the other aspect of the entire conversation, again, has to do with funding. Now, you cannot plan and be proactive if you cannot fund your activities properly. Now, this very particular agency, because I know what she went through to get funds released for the repatriation of the refugees. Okay, let us say because it is National Commission for Refugees. But are we willing as a nation that want to attract foreign investors to fund this ministry in such a way that the organizational structure is able to manage crisis to the extent that we can export the best practices that is coming out of those management to other countries? Now, this is another question we need to ask ourselves. So, this ministry cannot function without adequate funding to start with.
Yeah. Dr. Hamisu, thanks. And Juma, I think we also need to clarify this. Obviously, once the ministry is up and running, as it were, the ministry will have departments, and those departments will have units. So the presumption also will be some of the functions being undertaken today by some of the commissions, depending on how they are labeled, may then be subsumed under some of the ministries, under some of the departments or units, to have the links person from the ministry to the commissions. Because if a commission is established, a commission cannot be dissolved. I mean, unless also by an act that of the National Assembly. So those are formal issues that they will have to deal with going forward. Yes,
going forward. I was thinking, in a place like Maiduguri, talking about the Lake Chad and the insurgency, all these things we're talking about cannot be possible without tackling insecurity. And in Borno, she has a ministry that is already there,
yes.
RRR.
Yes.
with the Pioneer Commissioner as the present governor of Borno State, working really hard, what we are seeing is an escalation of insecurity in Maiduguri, you know, and a lot of orphans, like you talked about, social responsibility, social development, all these things will come in cohesion with the state government. In Borno, I don't think it's going to be a problem, actually, because she has been there, she has been right in the middle of the crisis, all the way to Bama. There's no place she has not been in Maiduguri. And I think from the way she is moving now, Borno State and the Lake Chad will be a target for her to try as much as possible to ensure that these orphans who don't have parents are resettled. You know, so how can she in any way change the narrative?
Well, it has to do, because fundamentally, as I said, she's already on track.
Yes.
For instance, she's returning most of our refugees. And some of these issues that we've raised are issues that have been tackled already. Yes. And the pilot state is Adamawa State. Yes. Adamawa State has an agency that is responsible for peace. I think it's Agency for Peace. It was established by the former governor, Bindao. And that ministry, that very particular agency, we had interface with the executive director, which is Dr. Agoso. So, except for Yobe, I think, is Minister of Women Affairs that is handling some of these issues. In Borno, RRR as well as Minister of Women Affairs. So, she already have the contact. She already have the contact. Now, changing the narrative in the Northeast is simple, and she's already doing that in terms of the coordination she has brought to bear on this very particular job of repatriation. So what she needed to do is to leverage from the lessons that have been learned from this very particular repatriation, as well as other engagement. As I said, what has been constraining her is not knowing the issues. It's not even assembling the teams that are supposed to carry out these functions. What has been hampering our operation has to do with timely releases of funds, because she needs to just go to the presidency to source for funds, unlike other ministries that have their funds somewhere else. So the only thing again that she needed to do is to bring research to bear. Now, I don't know, but I stand to be corrected if I will have to advise federal government. Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution should be a part of this very particular ministry. Presently, it is domiciled in Foreign Affairs. Now, what they've been doing, for instance, if you see what we've done with them, that is Presidential Committee on the Northeast Initiative, together with Institute for Peace, there is a framework to return peace to Taraba, in addition to what has been done for the Northeast. So, if we're talking about a ministry that's supposed to become preventive, and here you have an institute that is strategically placed to deal with recommendations affecting security. Yes. I participated in the launching of public presentation of the mappings of flashpoint or the crisis areas in Nigeria. That very particular document is wonderful. She needs it because it tells you areas where challenges of clashes, whether it is ethno-religious, whether it is farmers, elders, or what. It has already, the document has already mapped them. So all you need to do is to know these areas, have a proper preventive mechanisms in place. Those that you cannot prevent that erupt, you have second strategy of tackling them headlong. So changing the narrative in the Northeast is simple. One is funding, because the requirement in terms of the expertise she needed, the contact, all of those she has been coordinating with the state. And then she's doing wonderfully well. The only thing that is left is maybe by the time there is a national policy that she needed to follow up with the state and ensure that the state implement, that is where the new challenges will come from.
All right, Dr. Hamiso and the other guys, thank you very much. But I hope we're not creating the impression that this is a one-woman ministry or a one-person ministry. It's a ministry, I would say we have departments and units, and of course you have a full complement of staff. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll take the tweets that have come in from our viewers and then return to our guests for the remainder of the conversation.
You're welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria. And we have guests in the studios. We've been discussing on the new ministry that has just been established by the president. And we have tweets coming in. Nigerians are talking. Kinsley?
Mike Ayanko has this tweet. Said, some jokingly call this ministry of happiness, but not the Imo State scenario under Rochas. Now, based on the recent developments in the country, the new ministry is very important. We have many persons displaced by disasters, and we say kudos, therefore, to the president, since the challenges facing those persons who are displaced will now be taken care of. We had hitherto witnessed high level of corruption in alleviating the plight of these displaced Nigerians. The ministry should access funds from international donor agencies as well.
And from Law Alpha C, in view of the recurring decimal of insecurity, banditry, insurgency, kidnapping, flooding, erosion, the task before this ministry is huge and hydra-headed. Kudos should be given to this administration for carving out this very important ministry, taking into consideration the exigencies of the present realities. Adequate funding is key in realizing its objective.
Sorry, Michael and Makoji. Now, with the establishment of the ministry, we expect NEMA, that's the National Emergency Management Agency, to function more than ever before. Expectation is also high that indigent Nigerians would be accorded more attention in the area of social investment aimed at fighting poverty and improving the lives of the impoverished.
And Akeju Olagbaju tweets, apart from humanitarian components, the other components are well established in existing ministry and agencies. As at now, there are few or no humanitarian affairs officers in civil service. The ministry would need to rely on NGOs to play a greater role and do more of coordination.
Dele Jack Solomon tweets, now it says that Nigerians are expectant that the new ministry will be able to do all that is in its power to ameliorate the sufferings of IDPs. Now, a well-defined national policy on the IDPs through the ministry should help articulate a proper response on rights and privileges of this vulnerable group while in camp, as well as process of resettlement. Now, we expect better coordination of humanitarian services in the country.
And Badamasi Adamu tweets, the creation of the said ministry is a good development coupled with the insecurity that have engulfed the country. It will help in catering for the IDP. Like Fashola in the first time of PMB, the tasks are enormous, but with our experience, it's achievable, God willing.
Mohammed Satomi, the new ministry should pay more attention to IDPs of Borno State because they are dying daily.
And DW Nigeria Limited tweets, this ministry appears to be duplicating the roles of NEMA and others. How are we going to address these roles played by NEMA? Does this mean they would be reporting to the new ministry? I see this ministry as another avenue to compensate political loyalists.
Uche Gabriel, there's no need for this ministry since NEMA is there and has been working hard in the area of humanitarian affairs and disaster management with their branches in the 36 states of Nigeria and Abuja.
And Ahmed Mohammed tweets, to me, this is one of the most important ministries created. It came at the time we needed it most. We have a lot of challenges, flooding, IDPs, especially in the Northeast. Let the minister take this into focus and take immediate action.
Camilo Ibrahim Ramadan tweets, the ministry has to be proactive in the prevention of disasters.
And Abolama Babs tweets, as a new ministry, the name clearly shows the Herculean task before the ministry. Considering the current security imbroglio the country faces, the job is well caught out for the minister. Those who will be saddled with such responsibility from top to bottom should serve Nigeria and not self. The new ministry should work in synergy, not contrast with the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, and its state allied. There's a whole lot of jobs to be done, which includes assisting those repatriated from Libya and rescued from the Mediterranean in search of greener pasture.
Chris Simeon. Now, the new ministry should create a conducive atmosphere for international and local NGOs to come in and assist persons who are affected by one form of disaster or the other, conflict, flood, and so on. The ministry should see people as very important tools in developing society. Therefore, it should seek to address the underlying socio-economic factors that may lead to crisis.
And Ahmed Mohammed tweets, to me, this is one of the most important ministry. No, I think it's a repetition of the first tweet for me. Yes, Ahmed, yes.
All right. Now, well, let's again return to the situation that the new ministry is going to have to confront in terms of responding to either humanitarian situations or disasters, man-made or act of God. This is what we sometimes see. Elsewhere, when disaster strikes, you find that plane loads of supplies are taken to those locations, usually from the developed world. But here, it appears that our response time is tardy, and by the time the aid relief gets there, you know, the persons would have lost a lot of lives, and then persons would have suffered a great deal of hardship. How can we bridge our response time? And how can we have proper linkages with industry? Because the goods or the relief aid that I just mentioned just now are usually produced by industry, warehoused, and then when disaster strikes, you find the transport planes, you know, taking them off. But here, it appears that whenever disaster strikes, you have to first award a contract, and by the time you are processing all of that, people are dying, houses are going, business farms are, you know, disappearing. How can we, in terms of the new orientation of having a ministry that is now a coordinator, take us to this new frontier of response time and response action to disasters and humanitarian crises in our country? Claire.
Yeah, I think the absence of this ministry or the coming of this ministry should be able to solve that problem. Among the twists you just read, suppose are saying that the creation of that ministry is not necessary because NEMA is there, SEMA is there. But these are agencies that lack directions. The new ministry will now provide directions for these agencies.
I doubt if NEMA will agree with you on that. We've had NEMA DG here, and when it comes and he speaks and he tells you what they're doing and you see them doing, the challenge, it says, is usually with the linkage with the subnational entities, which are SEMAs. Anyway, continue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether they like it or not, they have to be subsumed under this new ministry. It's not a matter of choice. Okay? It's a necessity now that they have to, the SEMA or the NEMA will have to be subsumed under the new ministry. And then that does not stop them from coordinating with SEMA at the state levels. And then the issue of quick response, you have to consider our situation, our environmental situation. What are the logistics that you can that are readily in place? The air transportation system is neither here nor there. Our routes are in a horrible, state. Okay, so without all this infrastructure, being put into place, it will be very, very difficult to respond, to emergency situation the way we see abroad. Okay, because if you look at even our air transportation system, what do we have in place apart from what the commercial, those are able to commercial business. In terms of government response to serious emergency situation, we don't have them.
The Air Force, they've been...
I don't know how many aircraft are at the disposal of the Nigerian Air Force, for instance. I don't know how many. Even the war we are fighting, how well equipped is our Air Force? To talk of, having a big transport planes to be able to respond to emergency situation. So all that will have to be looked into by the new ministry. Okay, it should be part of the mandate of the new ministry to put in place structures that will be able to respond to emergency situations, crisis situations that where the nation is bedeviled with.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Claire Moluwole. Choksa Kamado, let's have your response to this.
Yes, I would want to differ a bit. I want to differ to the extent that I don't think it's entirely correct to say agencies like NEMA haven't been doing well. I think why Mr. President thought it necessary to bring this ministry on stream is to enhance efficiency. Of course, there are gaps here and there. With the coming of this ministry, the expectation now is that, okay, it would sit back, go from one relevant agency to another in search of data. When she harvests this data, the ministry needs to spend quality time in the policy laboratory. Look at them, evaluate them, and now think of how to fill the existing gaps here and there. That way, all the stakeholders within the disaster management environment will see themselves as partners in progress. Because really, this very destructive territorial war, it's not necessary. My thinking is that whether you are an agency of government or a department or a ministry that has something to do with disaster management or humanitarian affairs, that you will understand to be part of the president's next level agenda team. If you're part of that next level agenda team, then it behoves you to ensure that you play a collaborative role. There is no point going into unnecessary territorial war at all. So my expectation really is that the ministry should go about coordinating the activities of these relevant agencies in a most enlightened manner. And then these agencies should, in turn, give the ministry the requisite support and cooperation so that at the end of the day, their individual agency mandates would be better realized. Then the ministry would have also fulfilled its purpose. And who would be the better off for it? The average Nigerian. And all of us will be winners.
You know, we're talking about the value system of this country. Some people say it has been bastardized. You know, the youths of this country no longer feel as if this country belongs to them. How can this ministry key into the social, development responsibility of the ministry to ensure that our youths are up to par with their responsibility towards the nation too?
Well, I think the ministry should back an aggressive campaign for ethical rebirth. Okay. Ethical rebirth. We need a moral rearmament within the Nigerian youth population. We also need to really get them to begin to think Nigerian the more. Well, there is this them and us dichotomy. We need to break that wall of dichotomy. We need to let the youth realize that they too have a role to play. It is not true that it's just the old generation that has failed the youth. The youth, on their part too, they also have their own issues. So that way, there will be an understanding that, this blame has to be shared. It's shared blame. And when we understand that, this blame has to be shared, nobody will now find the moral right to point accusing fingers at each other or at one another. That way, you now begin to work more at how you can improve yourself and be a better citizen and see what you can contribute to national unity, national stability, and then the general progress of the nation.
All right, thank you. Reverend Father Obiezo, I would like you to also respond to what is the obvious gap in terms of adequate and timely reaction to disaster and crisis in the country.
Again, I also want to chime in with the fact that the existing agencies are doing work that have been assigned to them in terms of executing their mandates. Also, the fact of this ministry, as I said at the beginning, is not either to stifle their progress, but to enhance capacity and production, so that at the end, as Barrister said, it is a win-win thing for the whole Nigeria issue. Now, a timely response. Our colleague here said to respond to timely response is also going to be discussed beyond just the mandate of providing the response. The logistics have to come in place, and we cannot downsize the reality or overemphasize the fact that when structures that are supposed to facilitate timely response are not in place, you will always have a hitch in delivering. For instance, you mentioned either truckload or plane load of facilities. You also mentioned about awarding contract when the emergency is there. In some places, there are those identified organizations or firms that are doing such things. So they are preemptive in producing things like that. And then how could you imagine that in a situation like ours, where there are so many things, either in energy, that will not facilitate a firm to be able to produce on time, or as they said, using transportation as one of those things. Would this ministry go into repairing roads, getting more planes, getting energy done? It can't do that. But if it will also help, this is where I think collaboration among ministries will work. Yeah. When she comes to the meeting of the Federal Executive Council to say, come, I was not able to respond to this particular issue because it took us so amount of time to reach Maiduguri or to reach to Oshun because of bad road. So, Minister of Works, is there any way we could speed up this? So they could now share from each other what is it that you are experiencing that is hindering your own job to do yours. So I see that is the way she can actually help in that dimension. But I want to come into one other thing that the barrister says, how the ethical issue, as well as how do we build the...
Yeah, unfortunately, we're getting pressed for time.
Yes.
Because by the time you get into the realm of ethical rebirth and rehabilitation,
I'm not going to go deep
you just
into
might
that.
be bringing the National,
I'm not
National Orientation Agency, which is under the Ministry of Information and Culture. But just still on this issue of getting timely, adequate and effective response to disasters and humanitarian crisis. Dr. Hamisu, one point. We have seen in the Northeast an explosion in the number of NGOs, such that humanitarian response has now become a business and therefore almost counterproductive. So how might this new ministry help, to reorder things with regard to humanitarian crisis response in the Northeast? That's one. And secondly, we often hear that when disaster is looming, persons who are in the path of disaster will be urged to relocate. Where are they relocating to? Where you see floods, or other disasters in advanced countries, or people have received warnings, they are either moved to public buildings, schools, and then you have emergency supplies of bedding, mattresses, blankets, and so on and so forth. Here you are telling them to relocate to nowhere, to become IDPs, and that's why some of them resist. So how can we avoid this situation that has lingered on for so long a time? How can we get companies to provide, to produce, and then get the appropriate agencies to warehouse tents or materials that they can use for tents that can be temporary shelters?
Well, you see, I don't believe that these problems are not surmountable because others are doing it. And I don't want us to believe, it's just like when you're talking about technology, they will tell you Nigeria is not yet ripe. When will we be ripe? Now, for instance, in UN system, what they do is to pre-qualify vendors, service providers, ahead of time. And once there is any problem, they can request you to supply ABC, depending when they do the processes of payment and the rest. Because they already have determined prices, everything is set and is ready. So once there is any crisis situation, they just say, company A, can you supply us this because you are already in agreement with us while we process your paper. So if we work that way, that is going to assist us. Secondly, the roads are bad. The infrastructures are not fine. There is no doubt about it. But what can we do? For instance, when we're to take decision to lift the refugees, and the commercial airliners were contacted. By the time the bill came, she said, no, it's too outrageous. She approached Air Force, and Air Force provided aircraft. So can there be partnership in that direction to say that as we go on, we want our response time to be effective and impactful so that we can always leverage on that? That is one. Secondly, NEMA has asset, though there are challenges with their registration. So can the new ministry facilitate the fixing of those very particular issues so that NEMA can be effectively ready for response delivery? That, we have two corridors now of air benefit to lift whatever consignment that we have. The third one is our attitude to crisis management, especially this disaster management, is very poor. And I'm seeing what I would choose to call deliberate attempt to use this crisis to siphon money from government. For instance, if for 20, 30 years, This place was known as a waterway. Our grandfathers never built on those places. No. Then we are saying that we are a knowledgeable society today because we're enlightened. And the same regulatory ministries gave people CFO to build on those very particular waterways. And so every year there is flood. You ask them to relocate, nowhere to relocate to. Why can't government relocate those people to a permanent place, spending, for instance, say 10 billion to relocate them, and saving us 50 years of having to use 10 billion to support them when flood arises? So these are the kind of problem-solving disposition and focus that I'm expecting this very particular ministry to bring to bear on the issues around disaster management in this country.
Thank you so much. I'm sure the minister is watching and listening. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdurrahman Abu Hamisu, researcher and public affairs analyst. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Insightful discussion. Mr. Chus Akamadu, President, National Alliance Against Drug Abuse. It's been a pleasure having you. And Clem Olawole, Managing Editor, columnist, and editorialist with Blueprint newspaper. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you very much.
And Reverend Father Emeka Chris Obezu, OSA Migration Governance Expert and Coordination, Augustine Center for Peace, Advocacy and Justice. It's been a pleasure having you on the program.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.